Hello, freaks. I am sick as hell. I am very sorry about my voice. I'm still recovering from being sick. I'd like to think I'm on the tail end of it, hopefully, but, hopefully there aren't any more videos I need to do or scripts I need to record today, because, this one's probably gonna take the life out of me. But I wanted to talk about this movie, Spellbound, and basically going over from what I've heard about it from other people. I haven't watched any videos or reviews or critiques of it, but I have simply seen thumbnails and titles of articles and videos. And basically with that, generally the consensus is pretty negative, from what I've seen at least. But I wanted to talk about this film not just through the lens of not everything needs to be an absolute masterpiece in order to be enjoyable, but also I wanted to mention how I think this is a very important film, actually, despite the fact that I don't think it's going to win any awards of any sort. Basically, Spellbound is the type of film that I feel like is really good for explaining a very difficult concept to very, very young kids. And I'm not talking like middle schoolers. I'm talking like young kids, especially kids that are going through what the main character goes through in this movie. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the general plot and the characters first, just so we're all on the same playing field if you haven't seen it or have no interest in watching it. Basically, the whole movie is a metaphor for divorce, and the divorce basically is the catalyst of the climax, basically, but it's a very slow burn leading up to it and realizing the idea that the main character's parents, the main character's name is Elian, that Elian's parents basically have fallen out of love with each other, and this is shown through them basically turning into monsters, which is something that for the majority of the film we think it's some sort of spell, some sort of curse, some sort of outside force that caused this, but really it was just something that happened kind of naturally. And the only reason they're monsters is because of the setting that they were in when it happened. It wasn't something that basically there's this enchanted forest and the forest itself didn't curse them. They just happened to be in the forest that causes magical things to happen when they were really, really in a bad spot in their relationship. And I kind of really like that concept, actually, because of the fact that so many people like to blame relationships going south, basically, on one single event or one single thing that guys play nice. Sorry, those are my pets. They like to blame it on one single thing that started it all. And it's easy to look at it that way, especially for kids. But in reality, the thing is, relationships, especially when you're falling out of love with someone, it's a process. It takes time, and usually there's no one event that causes it. It's a host of different things, and it's complicated, and it's messy. And I feel like the movie itself does not go into great depths about specifically the relationship between the king and queen, in terms of how that relationship started to go sour, but it focuses more on how is this affecting Elian and how is this something that she has to come to terms with eventually. And it does have to be something that it has to prove the point, basically, that while a divorce is painful and difficult and extremely messy in terms of bringing in a host of other problems into it, or making some problems that were already there even worse, it's not something that is going to be the end of the world in terms of just saying life goes on. And I feel like a lot of times people don't seem to understand the idea that while yes, divorce is a very sad thing, I feel like people seem to just leave it at that, saying it's depressing and it ruins people's lives and that is all there is to it. Like, there's no way to be happy after it. And that's a really downer way to look at it. And I'm not trying to minimize anyone's pain here, but I do feel like there are ways to cope with it, which this movie basically very much tries to understand and get kids to understand that because this happens sometimes doesn't necessarily mean that the parents of the kid, or kids, I should say, are not always doing it with this malintent towards the kids. It's very much something that at the end of the movie they do make it very sweet in terms of saying we both will always love you to Elian. But the thing is that I feel like this is something where, yes, a lot of, unfortunately, divorces don't go that way. Sometimes there are some really bitter feelings towards either the kids or just the parents towards the family unit in general. But at the same time, I feel like it's really important to depict a divorced relationship in a way that isn't that, what's the word I'm looking for? That simply isn't that detrimental to the general lives of all parties. I really feel like this movie was not trying to say it's still a happy ever after kind of thing. I don't feel like this movie was trying to do that. And the reason why is because of the fact that throughout the whole entire movie, yes, it's an adventure movie that basically is, we got to get to this one goal in order to fix the problem, and that should solve everything. Of course, that's not how it ends up to be, because that's never how usual adventures stories ever end up to be. The MacGuffin thing itself doesn't always work just as it is. There has to be something else that is also accomplished that then activates the MacGuffin. And this does happen in this movie. And this whole time, Elian is trying to reconnect with her parents, who she feels like, in both the literal sense and the metaphorical sense, have turned into monsters and don't recognize her, don't understand her, and simply do not have anything in terms of a connection to her anymore. And as sad as that seems, the movie is very wholesome in terms of trying to rekindle that relationship, but also come to the terms at the end that, yes, there are some things about the relationship of the parents that aren't okay, and they need to deal with that, and maybe divorce is the answer for that. But that does not change the fact that Elian is very much at the center of everything, and that relationship that has now fallen apart between her parents doesn't have to constantly be this dark cloud over their lives. They can continue to thrive and be and work on themselves as people on their own and still love each other very much, just not in the same way they did before. I think that's a very mature way to look at it, actually. And again, that's not how all divorces go, and I don't think that this movie is trying to say that. But I really do feel like this movie does a good job of saying those things. So to summarize everything, basically, if you skip to this part and got through all my ramblings, basically, this movie, in my opinion, through the message, it is very much a good film. I do think there are still problems with it in terms of the pacing and in terms of the idea that this film sometimes had some very unnecessary elements, like basically there was a host of characters, or side characters, I should say, that probably didn't need to be in the film, like the royal advisors or anything in terms of the royal guard and army, that kind of thing. Those things were unnecessary, and some songs were unnecessary in terms of like the Flink song or anything involving basically repeating the same message over and over again. There were some really good songs though that I enjoyed, especially more towards the beginning rather than the end. But the thing is that I feel like this movie does what it needs to do well. It is a story that is trying to explain a very complicated topic in a more digestible way, not to say that it is censoring things, but simply is teaching kids, and to some extent also parents, that when there are relationship troubles, when there are troubles that a family goes through, that maybe things change in a not so ideal way, that is okay. And as long as everyone is putting in the effort to try and get better and communicating to each other that they still do love each other, this is the most important thing. And it is something where everything else can become a little more manageable. I feel like it's really important to have films like this because of the fact that it's not always something that has to be as simply life-destroying as it has been in the past. And maybe this film can help be a change towards that. I feel like there's a lot to say about things like marriage and in terms of how family dynamics end up as a kid gets older, if they do have a kid. I feel like those things, some of our morals or some of our ethics, maybe they do need to change in the sense that we need to be a little more accepting and give each other a little more grace rather than trying to live up to this perfect image that we've seemed to believe in for so long about the perfect marriage, about the perfect family. And I feel like this movie doesn't answer the question of what is right or wrong, but it just says that these things happen and there are ways to work through it. And that is very open-ended and not very specific of the movie to do, but I feel like it's still a good way to go about it. There were things about the film that did work in that aspect. So yeah, if you want to hear me talk more about this film, if you want to hear me get more into the nitty-gritty about the concepts of this film in terms of things like the magics, things like the songs, the characters, and how basically reviewing this more as simply a film critique rather than an effect on society, I feel like I want to do another video on this, but if that's not what you guys want, I totally understand. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Did you see this movie? Did you not see this movie? Is this the kind of film that sounds like it could do some good, or do you think it's just one of those films that is just gonna be forgotten and is not going to really have much of an effect on anything. That's okay too, you know? I want to hear your guys' thoughts. All those thoughts are welcome here because honestly, I don't know whether or not this film is going to be forgotten or maybe become a cult classic in a couple of years from now. I don't know. We'll see. So, I'm going to sign off for now and I'm going to go drink some soup because, yeah, sickness. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.